Good day, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the show on this Sunday, the 13th of April, 2025. Thank you for tuning in. This importer right here, he's calling it the end of days, the Trump China tariff. Uh, for years now, we've been going to places like Walmart or going to any store you go to, and most of the merchandise in there comes from China. And it's because they're more than competitive. But at the same time, the goods that they make, generally, they don't hold up real long. So you got to keep buying new ones, especially things like shoes. You buy it, the sole falls off after a week. First time you go through a mud puddle or something, the sole gets wet, it falls off the shoe. Stuff like that. You all guys all know what I'm talking about. But on the other side of that consideration, you have to realize that China has been being paid in American dollars for the merchandise that they've been accepting for over the years. And that payment in Federal Reserve notes, lots of times they'll go and buy treasuries with it, but it's still in U.S. Federal Reserve notes. That's stuff that the United States, because of their privilege of having the world reserve currency, they can create it from nothing. So if you're creating bills that from nothing, basically just printing them, what do you expect? Do you expect perfect merchandise that's not going to break? Yeah, I mean, what do you expect? But now all this is shifting. It's all being cut off. And I'm telling you, this is massive. And this is why he's saying end of days. I come across something yesterday. Ladies out there, women, are starting to prep more than the men because they're recognizing that it is end of days. Intuitively, uh, they were not, maybe if we went back to the start of my channel and stuff, they were not on board as much as the men initially. With the men, it was kind of like a thing, okay, we're going to fight the zombies. Okay, I'm going to prep or whatever, and I'm going out to the shed today and make myself a zombie thing to get rid of the zombies, and he's out there working on something. It probably involves a machete and something else. But the women weren't paying much attention and stuff. But now they can see it big time. And they're like, move out of the way. I'm at this now. I know how to do inventory, and I have skills for putting away canned food and all this kind of stuff. And they're right in there, and they're doing it in a little bit different fashion. More of a, how would I put it? Uh, More of when the time comes and the SHT hits. I would want to go with the women's prepping more than the men's, because the men's would just be a whole bunch of weapons in the barn. You know what I mean? And then they'd ask you, well, did you put any food away? No, I just figure all these weapons, what do I need food for? Well, the ladies, they're going to put away the food, so I'd rather be on their side of the fence, and because I like to eat, I don't want to go hungry. So anyway, they're in it now, big time. Oh, man. And I'm telling you, it's their intuition is telling them that's they're getting that feeling inside, uh, that, hey, this system it's on shaky ground, and these tariffs are shaking things up a lot more. They're shaking things up really fast. And so this exporter here, importer, I should say, he's calling this as the end of days. It says, Rick Woldenberg thought he had come up with a surefire plan to protect his Chicago area educational toy supply company from President Donald Trump's massive new tariffs on Chinese imports. When he announced 20% tariff, I made a plan to survive up to 40%. And I thought it was being very clever, he said. But then he said I'd worked it out for that very modest price increase, and we could withstand up to 40% tariffs, which was an unthinkable increase in costs. But it says his worst case scenario wasn't his worst case enough. Not even close. It says the American president quickly upped the ante with China, raising the levy to 54%, and then to a staggering 145%. And it says Waldenberg reckons that this will push Learning Resources, which is the name of his company, his tariff bill from 2.3 million last year to 100.2 million in 2025. And he says, quote unquote, I wish I had 100 million. He says, honest to God, no exaggeration, he says, this feels like the end of days. I guess he's going to go under. He says Americans are addicted to low-priced Chinese goods. It might be at the very least an end of an era of inexpensive consumer goods in America for 4 decades, and especially since China joined the World Trade Organization in 2001, Americans have relied on Chinese factories from everything from smartphones to Christmas ornaments. Now, what I heard is there's a couple items that Trump is not going to tariff. One of them is the smartphones. Evidently, the phones, they've taken that off of the tariff list. But everything else is still on board, you know. It says, as tensions between the world's two biggest economies and geopolitical rivals have risen over the past decade, Mexico and Canada have supplanted China as America's top source for imported goods and services. But there are going to be tariffs on them too. So it says China produces 97% of America's imported baby carriages, 96% of its artificial flowers, 95% of its umbrellas, 95% of its fireworks, 93% of its children's coloring books, 90% of its combs. People aren't going to be able to comb their hair. It's going to be a shortage of combs. Maybe you want to go out today and buy yourself a few combs because you might not be able to get any, really. If 90% of the combs in America are produced by China and that's just cut right off, well, the price will double on them first off. It says, over the years, United States companies have set up supply chains that depend on thousands of Chinese factories. This is what's greased the system. American consumers, it says, created China. They created China. In other words, all that money poured into China all those years. We saw the Chinese economy at a growth rate that was staggering, and building factories here, there, and everywhere. And so, what's going on? It says Trump's punitive China tariffs could end trade between the world's two largest economies, and that would be painful, volatile, and dangerous. Why dangerous is because this was a big card in the hand of the United States. It was like an ace. And you ever heard the old saying, you got an ace up his sleeve? This was like holding an ace. The fact that America could, all this trade that China does with America, America could hold that card and say, hey, you know what? You better not do this because we'll cut trade with you. Now that card's been played on the table. They've taken it away. They've taken trade away from China now. So China's like, hey, you know what? We got nothing to lose. We can do what we want now. Trade's already gone, and that was the biggest card America, I think, held. Right next to military action against the Chinese. It says Trump's punitive China tariffs could end trade between the two world's largest economies. Well, it's pretty much shutting it down. It said trade between the two largest economies is a link that's defined the world economy for 2 decades. This is ending right now. And so what I'm basically saying in my show yesterday was that it's like when you got your car parked at the top of the hill and you leave it unattended and it starts to roll down the hill. And in them first few seconds, you can run over and jump behind the wheel of the car and slam your foot on the brake and lock the parking brake. But if you let it go too far, and that's the way with this, we've seen the markets in the West, they're moving. And not in a good direction. But it hasn't hit the panic phase yet. I say yet. Do you know how quick those markets can roll down if they hit panic phase? And margin calls start to go out and everything, and everybody starts to panic and panic sell. That's the car getting to a speed where you cannot stop it any longer. Right now, the markets can be stopped and they can be turned around. It's time it's time right now to start your stimulus programs and stuff and put those markets back up there again if you're going to be successful at getting through all these tariff programs and stuff without having a depression, a Great Depression, because this is going to roll the Chinese economy over uh, in a bad way. And what's going to happen is China is going to start to collapse first, but they'll carry America down in a few months. The Chinese economy is very close second to the American economy. And if the American economy collapses, it would bring China down, right? Well, let's just say it works the same, vice versa. If China collapses, it'll bring America down. So we might be at the very start of seeing the collapse in the world economy. We're going into perhaps a world depression. Uh, so looking at the numbers and stuff, it says J.P. Morgan responds to the Fed. There is a liquidity crisis right now. Right? And if we read down here, it says that deleveraging and deteriorating of macro sentiment has morphed into a situation in which liquidity dynamics are now meaningfully impaired in liquid markets. This lack of liquidity could result in price moves that are outsized relative to the amount of flow that is actually going through. This in both directions. Significant bounces can take place on air, while it could be similarly lead to unruly market outcomes to the downside. In other words, what they're talking about is this liquidity crunch can lead to volatility in the markets, not just to the downside, but more than likely to the downside. It says unruly markets outcomes to the downside. This is an important in this context as we head into risk environments such as UST auctions and the FOMC minutes, CPI, and realistically every minute of the trading day now, as we are subject to tariff tape bombs. Tariff tape bombs. We'll just call them tariff bombs. That's what they are. It's like every time these tariffs go up, it's like dropping a bomb on the economy. It says equity turmoil has been fairly transparent via to the sell-off in indexes globally, but yesterday, April 8th, the conversation rapidly flipped from equities back into the fixed income world as United States Treasury yields surged meaningfully, led by the long end. It's pretty impossible for anyone to predict where we go from here, myself included, it says, but the deterioration of the broader liquidity framework is never a great setup for risk markets. This is a super high risk market right now. Now, what's going on in the world right now is the United States and Iran right now. Things were heating up. They're heading toward war. Well, right now they've held a constructive first round of nuclear talks. Great. Let's hope they get a nuclear deal through. But it's a little bit premature yet to try to say whether or not they will get a nuclear deal through. But let's hope for that, because I personally think that maybe they'll get this deal through and get this settled in Iran. But this isn't going to clear up what's happening over in Russia too. I mean, let's take a look at what's going on in Russia with the war in Ukraine. It's not over. Ukraine says this just happened. Just happened. Ukraine says 32 killed in a Russian ballistic missile strike on Sumy. See, Russia can apply pressure by hitting cities and hitting them hard and killing a lot of people. Die in an attack on a city. Whereas the main front of this war is like they can strike deep in territory, much deeper in these cities from the front lines. It's pushed a lot of pressure on Ukraine, quite seriously. So this war is far from over, and when you start to get mass casualties like this deep inside Ukrainian territory, it's not good for the Ukrainians. it can apply pressure. Let's just put it that way. Now, what's happening in markets right now? Well, at the end of the week, we saw the Dow Jones take a bounce up 600 points. It ended the week at 40,212. So back up above the 40,000 mark. This is going to be a critical week coming up in all of this. But overall, I cannot see the markets rebounding back into their old territory until something happens to give them a, an incentive to bounce back. I mean, things are not good. This this whole trade tariff thing is absolutely huge. It's changing the entire structure of world trade, and it's making it more so that the countries are more isolated. You're going to see more goods that are made inside your country, whether it's here in Canada for sale, because people don't want to pay the tariffs, and it'll increase domestic production in each country. But uh, like America will increase for the goods that they're gonna lack coming from China. It's going to give incentive to uh, companies and stuff to open up and start building those same goods for Americans, because now the price is twice as high and the competition has been cut out, and you don't even have to ship it, and there's no trade tariffs any longer if you make it inside your own country. And so these tariffs kind of move countries more toward isolationism rather than a world global trade market. It's basically severing those trade lines, and it's making each country like have to be more independent on their own goods. At the same time, we've been seeing a movement toward countries increasing their military too to guard their borders. And so it's like the world is being uh, it's say the world was a pair of jeans, and you take a pair of scissors to it and you cut off each individual section. And I mean, those sections have already been there. Well, Canada's been Canada, America's been America, England's been England, and so on. All the countries been there, but they were more interacting with one another before. Now they're getting more like this is more territorial. I guess that's what I'm trying to get across. Is it's that the direction we're moving in is more like, you know, each country become a more like North Korea, a hermit kingdom. Each country, that's the direction they're moving. Okay, they're not like North Korea yet, but I'm just saying that's what this direction moves toward. You know, each country being its own like, yeah. That's what I'm trying to get across. Anyway, uh, it took me about an hour to get it out. Well, thank you guys for being patient with me on that. Okay, so here we go. Uh, the markets. S&P was up 90 some odd points to 5,363. The Nasdaq was up 300 points to 16,724. They're all up. The Russell is up 28 points to 1,860, and crude oil was up $1.41 to 61.48. And gold finished the week at 3,254. I remember shows I did where I was saying, you guys, you're going to see $2,500 gold before this is through. I remember, you know, back when it was like $1,100, I was telling you it's going to be $2,500 gold, you know. And I think I was saying $50 silver. Well, silver's still way down there. It hasn't taken its leap yet. Gold has. Look at this. $3,254 for gold. So gold's made its move, and silver's been leaving behind. But you know that's not gonna last long, because there's a reason why out there they say gold and silver and gold and silver. You've heard it all your life, silver and gold. When they talk about the two, they don't just say gold; they say silver and gold, or gold and silver. There's a reason for that. The two do travel together, you know. And so what this has done is it's made the gold to silver ratio way out of whack right now. It's so far out of whack, it's like unbelievable. I think the peak it could go to the gold to silver ratio is 140 to 1. I think it'll crack if it goes any higher than that. It'll crack, and it'll crack suddenly. But that's the peak where I'm going to put a cutoff peak, and I'm going to say it won't go past that point of 140 to 1. But we're on our way there right now. We're headed in that direction. And in the opposite direction, 4 to 1. I think it's going to make it to 4 to 1. I think it's going to overshoot the historical ratios that we used to have, like 14 to 1, 15 to 1. This period we've went through is absolutely absurd, where gold has been like ranging between 80 and 100 to 1. It's absurd, and it will not last. Not with the way they're hauling silver out of the ground and putting it in things like solar panels, and then it ends up in landfills. Oh, they had a big field down there in Texas, and it was like miles and miles of solar panel, and a big storm come along with hailstones, smashed them all. Where do you think they go? They end up in the landfill, being crunched up. All that silver's in the landfill now. And what do? They get the insurance company and then they go out and they buy a whole bunch of new solar panels. More demand for silver. It's never ending. And they're hauling it out of the ground that's ended up in landfills. What do they do with the gold? Even the things they make, like earrings and rings and stuff, they do make jewelry out of gold. It doesn't end up in any landfill. When it gets really old, the people will take their jewelry into the store and sell it. You've always seen these stores, We Buy Gold, and it ends up being collected in there until it gets to be a substantial amount. Then they send it out to the smelter, who melts it into a bar, and that bar gets melted into a bigger bar later on, and all those bigger bars get shipped off to a vault where they collect dust inside a vault. And it never goes away. So we keep accumulating gold. Very little gold gets wasted. Where silver, they're just wasting it to the left, wasting it to the right, and the tune of hundreds of millions of ounces a year wasted. So even though there is more silver in the ground than gold, it is being wasted. They're wasting the whole Earth's supply of silver. And the U.S. Geological Survey did an article on it just a few years ago, and they said, hey, you know what? This is going to be the first on the periodic table of elements. This is going to be the first one that's probably going to go extinct. I don't think they used the word probably. They said it is going to go extinct, because we're consuming it all out of the Earth's crust, every ounce we can find everywhere. We can scour in the earth for it, using modern big digging machines to dig it out rapidly. And we're just consuming it all in industry, and the ore grades are dropping. And it's going to get to the point where, there was a point where I think they got 17 ounces per ton of ore. So they haul out a ton of rock and they get 17 ounces of silver. I think it's down to what is it lately? I think like 7 or 8 or something. Soon it'll be like 4. A few years from now, maybe 4 or 5 years from now, or 6 years from now, or something. It might be like 4, and then you move 10 or 15 years further than that into the future, and they're only going to be getting like 1 ounce per ton. Well, then they're down to the same ratio they do for the gold now. So the price would have to be just as high. But do you really believe that, like, say 15 years from now, the price of gold will be the same as it is now? I could see gold being more than $10,000 an ounce, and I can see silver being a 4 to 1 ratio. It's not unusual to think that the prices that you're seeing for gold right now, silver will be just as high in just a few scant years. So basically, it's like your silver will turn into gold. That's what it's like. So what's the silver price today? $32.24. That's a good bounce back. You know what made it under $30 for a short period of time there during this crisis? I should say the beginning of this crisis. You haven't seen the major fulfillment of this crisis play out yet. It's just in the starting point. Like I say, it's the car at the top of the hill. It's just starting to roll down the hill. They could still slam on the brake and stop this thing. But they let it get going faster, and we're in for the whole thing's going to go down the hill, run into a tree, and it's going to burn. That's what's going to happen. And I don't think they're going to stop it. I don't think they're going to get ahead of this thing and stop it in time. I think that they're going to let it get momentum, and they're going to try to throw their bodies in front of it rather than have it go down the hill and burn, the entire system burn. They'll throw their bodies in front of it. And what do I mean by that? They'll dump money like when the real trouble hits. They're never proactive. They're always running behind trying to chase the cars that's running down the hill. Only when they get to the point where they panic, and panic hits the markets. They'll let this thing go. This is what they're going to do. And then by the time they run in to stop it, it's going to take, I don't know, $20 trillion to stop it. What do you think that's going to do to your dollar? Poof, flames. Your dollar is going to incinerate quicker than a piece of firecracker. Gee, Murphy. Bonds and rates today. We're looking at rising yields. This is what could crack everything open. I'll tell you honestly. The 10-year, we got to keep our eye on the 10-year. It's at 4.49 right now. It was up 10 basis points. We got to watch it this week. If we see that 10-year start to go past 5%, start to push towards 6%, it's trouble. Now our dollar index is not looking that great either. 99.78. It's dropped below 100. Well, thank you guys for listening to my show. You guys have a great rest of the weekend. And we'll catch you again very, very soon. Bye-bye.